In a landmark decision, the Supreme Court has redefined American trade policy, curtailing presidential power to impose tariffs. The ruling challenges the foundation of former President Trump's tariff strategy, emphasizing Congress's constitutional role in regulating foreign commerce. This decision marks a pivotal moment in the separation of powers, asserting that Congress cannot delegate sweeping economic authority to the president without clear guidelines. The court's 6-3 vote concluded that Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 gave the president excessive discretion. The ruling halts Mr. Trump's proposed tariffs and sets a precedent that limits future presidential use of tariffs as a policy tool. It signals a judicial shift towards a stricter interpretation of the Constitution, redefining the balance of power between Congress and the executive branch. The decision forces Congress to reclaim its duty to manage international trade, a task largely ceded to the presidency over decades. The court's action is a constitutional course correction with far-reaching implications for future administrations. The ruling suggests a renewed focus on the specific text of the Constitution, altering the landscape of American trade policy. The decision effectively invalidates the legal framework for Mr. Trump's ambitious tariff proposals. It creates a new legal precedent, constraining how any future president can use tariffs as a tool of foreign and economic policy. The court has drawn a new line in the sand, reshaping the future of American trade policy. This judgment reverberated instantly from the Supreme Court to Wall Street, representing a fundamental re-evaluation of trade laws. The landscape of American trade policy has been irrevocably altered as a result. Former President Trump's trade strategy centered on America first, using tariffs as a tool to protect U.S. industries. He argued that free trade agreements harmed the U.S., sending jobs overseas and creating trade deficits. His solution was a universal 10% tariff on nearly all imports, a departure from targeted tariffs. Proponents claimed it would generate revenue and protect industries from unfair competition. The plan aimed to make American goods more competitive by raising import costs, hoping to boost domestic manufacturing. Trump used tariffs as leverage in negotiations, believing they would compel countries to lower trade barriers. However, economists warned that broad tariffs would act as a tax on consumers and businesses, increasing costs. A study estimated a universal tariff could reduce U.S. GDP and eliminate jobs. The strategy was controversial, setting the stage for legal and political challenges. Critics argued it would raise consumer prices and disrupt supply chains. The plan's bold vision and risks led to a major confrontation over trade policy. The Supreme Court's ruling invalidated the legal basis for Trump's tariff proposals. This decision shifts the focus back to Congress, requiring new trade laws. The ruling highlights the need for a balanced approach to trade policy. It underscores the importance of legislative oversight in economic decisions. The debate over protectionism versus free trade continues, now centered in Congress. The legal challenge to Trump's tariff authority was years in the making, driven by businesses claiming economic harm. They argued the president overstepped constitutional bounds, misusing Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. The case ascended from lower courts to the Supreme Court, questioning the president's national security justifications. The central issue was whether Section 232 was an unconstitutional delegation of legislative power. The non-delegation doctrine, which prevents one branch from transferring its duties to another, was at the heart of the case. The Supreme Court's decision to hear the case signaled its willingness to address this complex debate. The government argued presidential discretion was essential for responding to global threats. Challengers claimed the law lacked guidance, giving the president unchecked power to impose tariffs. The court's ruling reasserted Congress's role in trade policy, limiting executive authority. This decision reshapes the legal landscape, requiring clearer guidelines for presidential action. The case highlights the ongoing tension between executive power and legislative oversight. The ruling sets a precedent for future challenges to presidential authority in trade matters. The Supreme Court's ruling revitalized the non-delegation doctrine, emphasizing separation of powers. The doctrine asserts that Congress cannot delegate its core lawmaking responsibilities without clear guidance. The challenge to Trump's tariff plan argued Section 232 lacked an intelligible principle, allowing unchecked presidential power. The court found the term national security too vague, enabling economic protectionism. Conservative justices questioned the broad interpretation of national security, while liberals worried about practical consequences. The ruling enforces a stricter separation of powers, requiring Congress to provide clear standards. This decision could impact other federal laws delegating authority to the executive branch. The case tests the court's willingness to enforce constitutional boundaries in trade policy. The ruling underscores the need for legislative clarity in delegating powers to the executive. The Supreme Court's majority opinion reclaims congressional power, focusing on Section 232's lack of guidance. The court emphasized that the power to tax and regulate commerce belongs to Congress, requiring clear instructions for delegation. The ruling found the executive's interpretation of national security had expanded beyond its intended scope. The decision rebukes the idea of presidential lawmaking in trade, setting a stricter standard for delegations of power. The court declared that Congress must provide clear standards when delegating authority, touching on core constitutional powers. The ruling returns the responsibility for trade policy to Congress, requiring new legislation. This decision clarifies the separation of powers, reinforcing Congress's role in economic decisions. The ruling sets a precedent for future challenges to executive authority in trade matters. It highlights the importance of legislative oversight in shaping trade policy. The dissenting justices defended the status quo, arguing the court overstepped its role. They contended that foreign policy and national security require presidential flexibility. The dissent argued economic security is integral to national security, justifying broad presidential discretion. They warned the ruling weakens U.S. leverage in trade negotiations, leading to slower policy responses. The dissent emphasized judicial restraint, arguing delegation decisions are political, not judicial. They claimed Congress's inaction on Section 232 indicates endorsement of the existing framework. The dissent warned the ruling creates legal uncertainty and weakens executive power. The Supreme Court's ruling sent shockwaves through the business community, offering relief to import-dependent industries. Industry groups praised the decision for preventing a massive new tax on American families. The stock market reacted positively, with shares of import-dependent companies rising. However, sectors like steel and aluminum, which benefited from tariffs, expressed concern. These industries fear vulnerability to cheaper imports, threatening domestic production. The ruling creates legal uncertainty, leaving businesses in limbo over existing tariffs. Companies now face a complex landscape with potential new litigation over specific tariffs. The decision shifts focus to Congress, requiring businesses to lobby lawmakers for trade protections. This new reality demands adaptation, as trade policy becomes more politicized. The ruling empowers Congress to take a more active role in setting trade policy. The Supreme Court's decision impacts global trade, welcomed by America's trading partners. The ruling is seen as a step toward a more predictable global trading system. International markets reacted positively, reducing the risk of a global trade war. For American consumers, the decision prevents significant price increases on imported goods. The ruling shields consumers from the cost of living hikes associated with broad tariffs. However, it may embolden other countries to challenge U.S. trade practices. The decision shifts focus to Congress, requiring legislative oversight in trade matters. Global leaders will now watch Capitol Hill closely, adjusting to a new trade landscape. The ruling could lead to a more fragmented and politicized U.S. trade policy. The world must navigate a more complex American trade environment. The Supreme Court's ruling rebalances power in U.S. trade policy, reviving the non-delegation doctrine. The decision curtails presidential use of broad tariffs, affirming Congress's role in regulating commerce. It blocks Trump's universal tariff plan, creating short-term legal ambiguity but potential long-term stability. Congress must now engage in writing clear trade laws, leading to intense lobbying and debate. The ruling moves the protectionism versus free trade debate to Congress, where it belongs. The decision opens a new chapter in American trade law, filled with questions and challenges. It asserts judicial power and reaffirms the principle of separation of powers. The ruling shapes the President-Congress relationship for generations. As the nation absorbs this historic judgment, the question remains: can Congress effectively manage trade policy? The shift in power may leave the U.S. at a disadvantage on the world stage.